Hello, thank you for joining us at the SPUR Undergraduate Student Researcher panel. My name is Sarah Hamilton. My pronouns are she and her. I'm an academic advisor with the Rouser College of Natural Resources and the SPUR Fall and Spring Coordinator. I'll be serving as the moderator for this session. Also assisting me with the moderation of this information session is another Rouser College academic advisor, Anna Hoehenrieder.
Hi, I'm Anna Hoehenrieder. Like Sarah said, my pronouns are also she and her, and I'm excited to also learn more about the student research today.
To start off, I would like to discuss the outline for today's information session before introducing our panelists. After we introduce our panel and go through some basic information about the SPUR program, we will open the Q&A feature and you can send us your questions. Anna and myself will be monitoring the questions and will direct them to the panel in an orderly fashion. We expect all participants to abide by the UC Berkeley principles of community so that we can maintain a safe, caring, and humane environment, and we'll be removing individuals who violate these principles. Lastly, we'll be recording the session and question log. Now that I've gotten all the logistics out of the way, I'd like to introduce our four panelists joining us. First, we have Isaac Aguilar, Sarah Bowie, Anna P., and Susie Warner. Panelists, please introduce yourselves and share a little about yourself and your interaction with the SPUR program. We can start with Isaac, then go in alphabetical order.
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Isaac Aguilar. I use he, him pronouns. I am a junior studying ecosystem management and forestry and molecular environmental biology. And this semester, the project title is Effects of Low Flow on Sierra and Identification in the Lab. I'm helping out in the Rookie Lab, the Nevada stream food webs. So I work a lot with like macroinvertebrates.
Sarah, why don't you go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm a senior. I'm double majoring in environmental science and econ. So the lab I'm associated with SPUR this semester is the Wang Research Group, and the title of my project is the Global Analysis of Seasonal Asynchrony.
Hi. My name is Anna P., and I'm a junior this year. My pronouns are she and her. I'm in the Kong Lab in the Nutritional Science and Toxicology Department in CNR, and the project title that I've been working on is DNA methylation machinery and adipose biology.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently a fourth year. I'm double majoring in environmental econ and conservation and resource studies. And this semester, I'm participating in Professor Kathy DeMaster's lab, which is in the SPUM department. And my project is called, sorry, it's quite long, so I'll read it out loud. It's called Crisis and Climate Change in a Northeastern Californian Community. So I've been doing a lot of archival research.
Great, thank you all. I want to start us off by giving a quick interview of the SPUR program. The Sponsored Projects for Undergraduate Research program encourages faculty and undergraduate students in the Rouser College of Natural Resources to collaborate on research projects, providing a grant to support their joint project. The funding for this program is generously donated by Rouser College alumni. Students may participate in the SPUR program by applying to faculty-initiated projects or by creating their own student-initiated project. This panel will be highlighting the student researcher experience with the Fall 2020 faculty-initiated projects. Spring 2021 faculty projects will post to the SPUR website December 18th. Students can submit their applications for up to 3 faculty-initiated projects between January 12th and January 26th at 5 p.m. is the deadline. We expect to have a mix of in-person and remote projects in the spring semester. To apply, you will need a resume, personal statement, and unofficial transcripts. We have a couple questions to start off with. I'm going to list them all now so that you as the audience can start thinking about them. The Q&A feature is also now open, so please feel free to start submitting your questions as well. First question, how do you navigate the SPUR application process? Second question, how do you balance your academics and SPUR research? Third question, what has been your biggest takeaway from working on a SPUR project? So let's start with question 1. How did you navigate the SPUR application process? Isaac, I'll let you start.
All right. Hopefully my sound is coming through a little bit better now. But yeah, I remember first hearing about SPUR and Uwrap like when I first came, and the application process always seemed a little daunting as a first year who didn't have any like previous research experience. But it wasn't until my sophomore year that I really, worked up the courage and got a lot of support from friends and from peers to go through the process. And I realized that there are a lot of opportunities to get involved through SPUR. And it really helped with like previous experience that I had developed through work study jobs. So the application process itself can be a little bit daunting, but it is meant to be a straightforward process, and there are a lot of different opportunities that cover a wide variety of interests. And so that way it's pretty easy to find a project that you're interested in. And then being able to apply to more than one also helps with that potential to get accepted into a position. And they are meant for introductory positions. Most of them do not expect you to have considerable research experience in the past. So definitely don't be afraid of the process. Always look for support from peers and from the advisors. They are there to help you, and they really hope that you find a really great opportunity to get some experience.
Yeah, similar to Isaac, like I started applying to SPUR in my sophomore year because the deadline is earlier than you think. You always know it's early, but you never realize how early it is until the semester started and everything got rolling. So definitely prepare. But I definitely spend like a lot of time like going through all the projects because like the title, like some of the projects have very detailed explanation and it may sound very, very confusing. So you really do have to read like multiple times. Like read the description multiple times to like decide what to apply for. And I think that the application is definitely a number game, and you might have to apply to multiple semester to get one, because I remember in my sophomore year I didn't get any just because like my coursework was not enough yet, and like I did have some interview but I wasn't as well prepared yet. And so like just they're like you're gonna have like 7 or 8 semester here, and just apply and go to the interview and just experience what it's like, and when during an interview process also ask them about like what is it like being a student researcher, what are you looking for, and so you can prepare like better for the next round, and you also kind of figure out like what lab culture and environment that you want to be in. So yeah.
Yeah, I applied for SPUR actually in my freshman year, my second semester. So one thing I would say is if you are a freshman or if you're like younger, don't be scared about applying. A lot of labs don't expect any experience and they actually prefer younger students because they can train you early on and you can stay with the lab for a while and they don't have to worry about retraining you. So don't be scared if you're young. Also, if you're like in the later years, you probably have more experience, so don't worry about applying too. When I applied, I went through the faculty initiated projects on the website and I kind of read through the introductions. If I wanted more information, I could Google the lab and see what papers they had published and see if that was kind of the direction of research that I was interested in. So that was kind of how I looked through labs and projects and decided which ones I thought were nice. The application process itself is pretty straightforward. The instructions are on the application. So you just turn in your resume and a personal statement and a little bit of information about yourself. But yeah, don't be worried about applying.
Yeah, like the other panelists, I also spent a lot of time reviewing all the descriptions for the projects online. Some of them are quite extensive, but I think that something that's really helpful is that there's contact information on the website. So you can always like contact the professor or like the grad student in charge, so you can ask more questions about where they are specifically in that process that they've detailed a lot of online. So I think I'll go back and explain a little bit more about me. So like I mentioned before, I am a 4th year now, but I remember applying for SPUR back when I was a freshman in my 2nd semester. And I also remember applying for 2 projects and I wasn't accepted to any of those. So I do feel like I made the mistake of feeling daunted by that. But now that I look back, I can agree with Sarah that oftentimes research is a numbers game. And I'm now working on a project with 4 other students. One of them is a sophomore. We're all in different grades. So I think that it's true. Professors and researchers do look for students of all grade levels, and don't be afraid to try. And if it takes more than one semester, then that's okay. And that's completely normal.
Great, thank you all. Speaking to this semester and previous semesters, how did you balance your academics and your SPUR research? Go ahead and start with Ike.
Yeah, so it can definitely be, the idea of balancing research with a full course load, maybe more, can be a little scary sometimes. So it is important, to really think about what your goals are, both in academics and research and professionally, just to think about, the time that you want to spend working in these research projects and the time you want to spend, working towards your degree. Because what you don't want to do is really overload yourself and not be able to make considerable progress in either one of those areas. So it is important, you gotta manage your time wisely. Don't overload yourself, and make sure that you're really putting in the effort and you're really enjoying the experience you have both in your classes and also in the project. So definitely plan, before every semester when you're picking out your classes, and think about the other jobs or courses other responsibilities that you will have, just so that you can make the most out of the research project.
Yeah, for me, I think it depends on what kind of lab you're in. If you're in like a wet lab, usually the expectation is that you have to do like 10 hours a week or something. But sometimes if you're in like a more social science lab, then it's like a lower amount, like 3 to 6 hours maybe. So it really depends on your preference of projects. But also like, if you're involved in a project through multiple semesters, then your first semester might be really difficult because you don't really know how to manage time and coursework yet. But like your second semester, once you know that you're continuing the lab, you can plan out your classes better, so that you have a big chunk to be in lab and you don't have to be like a lot of like traveling time involved. But yeah, I think in terms of balancing, I think that the research experience can help with the academic experience, especially if you're applying all the things that you're studying in class to lab. But yeah, I feel like all of my graduate student advisor and PI have always been very, very attentive. Like they always tell me like, oh, if you have a midterm or anything, like just let us know and we don't expect you to be in lab. So don't like feel like you have to sacrifice your academic for research. Just communicate with them and I think they will support you.
Yeah, so I work in a wet lab, which, like Sarah mentioned, does take quite a few hours a week during a normal semester. But this past fall, everything has been online, so I've had a little more time. In general, I would say that if you're planning on applying to a wet lab, do plan out your semester beforehand to set out chunks of time, because experiments will take hours. You don't want to leave in the middle. So it's good to plan ahead in terms of that. But also the nice thing about a wet lab is I think of it as almost like another class in terms of time. It's during the day, so you're not taking up your afternoons. And so you can leave yourself the afternoons to study and to work on schoolwork. Yeah, so.
So for me, a lot of all of my work has been remote. So some examples of things that I do throughout the week include looking through databases for news articles, reading through interviews from sheriff offices and from Board of Supervisors, other governmental entities in that specific county that I'm researching about. And I think that's something that I really helped for me was that we have weekly meetings, and it's best to not hold off on hours of research until Thursday for our weekly meetings on Fridays. I think that it is very normal as a student to get a lot of work piled up. But if you also have remote work like me, it's really helpful to do at least like 15 or 30 minutes, maybe the day of your meeting or the day right after, so that if you have any questions and if you have any issues, you can contact your grad student or your professor right away, so you can get those questions answered and be able to do work later on. Otherwise, it might be like the day before your meeting, and you might run into an issue. And I will say that if you ever do run into issues, my grad student has been very open to answering them. And then she's also open to understanding that we are in very unusual times. And if you ever need more time to do some work or something, they're understanding and open to that.
Great, thank you all. And our last question that I have prepared is, what has been your biggest takeaway from working on a SPUR project? Go ahead and start us off, Isaac.
Yeah, I think, so I should go back and clarify the lab and project I'm working on. So I'm in the Ruhi lab, and I'm most of the time I spend, it is an in-person project where I will identify macroinvertebrates that were collected out in the field. And so the biggest takeaway that I've gotten from my SPUR projects has really been developing that experience and using, whether it's lab techniques, using microscopes, taxonomy, and identifying different species has been like one of the biggest things that I've really appreciated, that I've taken away from the experiences that I've had through SPUR projects. Yeah, this is my second project working with insects and other macroinvertebrates. So I've had a really great time. I really prioritize that like hands-on in-person opportunities, which is why I took on that during this, very remote semester that we all have. And it has been nice to at least have that opportunity to continue that like hands-on learning during this time. And so I would say that's definitely one of the biggest takeaways that I've had from my personal experiences with the SPUR projects.
Yeah, so my project, the Global Seasonal Asynchrony, with the Wang Research Group, I do a lot of GIS, like Geographical Information System, where I kind of like do analysis on global data sets on Python and Google Earth Engine. So really, really cool things. And I think what I learned most about it is like to be like creative, because like when you're coding, you always like stumble across some kind of like roadblock and you have to debug and you have to think about it, but then you have to be creative in like whatever code you write. And it's also like, I've never used Google Earth Engine before using JavaScript. So it's kind of like in the process, you're also learning like new languages and like new system of dealing with data. And that's like really cool. And I feel like, and also like, you also like learn a lot from your graduate student advisor, because I asked him a lot about like, oh, like, how did he decide to go on his PhD track? Like, what is his like career like and everything? And you can learn a lot of personal experience from them too. And I think the SPUR has really helped me overall, because I've gained skills to do, because I'm doing a senior thesis this year. And a lot of the skills I built on the SPUR project, this project specifically, have helped me on like doing research on my senior thesis, so which is really fun.
Yeah, so I work in a wet lab. We do DNA methylation processes. We study that in King Lab. And so one of my biggest takeaways through the SPUR research program has really been the experience you get working in an actual lab. I think it's a very different experience from lab classes that you would take in class in school, and it's really nice to see how the research process works, to get to do a lot of hands-on activities, to really try a lot of the experiments that you really only hear about in class. And so I think it's a really fun experience.
So to go a little more specifically into what I've been doing, I've been specifically looking into how language and policy around cannabis cultivation has been changing over the last couple of years in like this specific county in Northern California. So it's been definitely a really interesting experience to be able to read all these like firsthand opinion articles, news pieces, and to directly listen to what's happening at these meetings, because day to day, even month to month, the language and the action is constantly changing around this. So I think that one takeaway I have is that something is always happening out there, and that it's going to be a lot of work, whatever you do as a researcher, but that I guess I found more confidence in myself in being able to do this, in being able to research, look through and personally read these accounts, and then find what's happening in these counties on a direct level.
Wonderful, thank you all. So now I'm going to start reading off the questions from our attendees. First question, how can you build an effective resume when you haven't had a chance to gain any research experience as a transfer student?
I can start off, I guess. When I apply, I also didn't have any research experience. So I think it's important because like when you apply, you also have to write like a cover letter or like a little like mini essay. Is to really like read the project description and to really like explain your interests, like explain why you're so interested in that project, and like how emphasizing that you're a good learner, you're a fast learner, you can learn on the job, and so like your past experience, and maybe like indicate some past experience that might not be research, but have some kind of like indirect links with the topic or a project that you're interested in. And in terms of like resume format and things like that, like the Career Center has really good resume services, so they can like read over your resume, give comments on it, and make your resume as good as possible. And so yeah, so I think, but a big part, it's still like I feel like your cover letter is more important because you know you can't like they read. I feel like they give more weight to the cover letter, but I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I'd love to add a little bit as well. I am not a transfer, but something I learned with like trying to really emphasize different experiences that you've had in your resume is really drawing on a wide variety of experiences that you have had, whether it be like volunteer opportunities, maybe it could just be a job that might not be related to what your interests are, but there are skills that you develop, and really being able to draw out skills from those opportunities, and then using the cover letter as an opportunity to go further into depth on those, and talk about maybe class projects that you've had in fields related to what you're interested in or what project you're applying for. That way you can really show your interest in developing experience in those fields, even if you don't have any previous experience working in those types of fields.
Yeah, I'd say definitely tell a story through your cover letter about your experiences and who you are, and like why you want to work specifically in that research lab and for that purpose. And I think that something else that really helped me was that I could draw on just other class projects I've done, things I've learned in classes that I want to be able to research more on my own. So I think that really helped. Because I could, for example, talk about how I had taken a lot of SPUM courses and learned about environmental cultures, but how I actually wanted to figure out on my own how I could be part of that process in learning and uncovering the history behind it.
Yeah, so I'm also not a transfer, but I think for your application, when you're talking, really try to emphasize how much you're interested, even if you don't have experience. Like I mentioned, I applied pretty early on. I had absolutely no experience. The only thing I had was maybe classes. So if you can maybe like mention a little bit about experience you've had in classes before, but not all projects will require research experience. So I think if you express enough interest and you really sell your like sell yourself really well, I think it should be okay.
Next question is, how important is GPA when applying to research? I would just like to also highlight that the GPA requirement to apply for a faculty initiated projects is a 2.0.
Yeah, I can start off. I would say GPA, as long as you meet that requirement, shouldn't be too much of a factor that really would prevent you from applying. Um, just because I think especially if you are doing well in the courses that you're interested in, courses in the field that you're in the fields that you're interested in, I think that's really going to show, your effort in that field and your interest in working in that lab specifically. So as long as your the grades in those specific classes that you might be are interested in reflect your motivation for that field. I believe that would be the most important as opposed to your entire GPA.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you should let your GPA deter you from applying, because I have friends that were afraid that their GPA would be too low to be considered, but they have been completely fine getting like SPUR project and getting on research experience. So as long as you already took the required class and you passed it, then I don't think there should be a problem, because I think in lab that they also retrain you in every single thing that you're gonna be doing anyway.
Great. So our next question is, for students who have applied to SPUR multiple times and have repeatedly gotten rejected, what would you advise as the top thing to do better on your applications to improve their prospects?
I think one thing that could be really helpful is talking to grad students in the classes that you're taking now, your GSIs, asking for their advice or what they think. You could I think that at the end of the day, like grad students are humans too, and they're also students, so they understand what undergrads are going through and what it's like to be learning in this remote environment. So I'd say definitely seek advice from grad students and GSIs that you have now, especially if they work in the same department as a lab that you want to apply to in the future. I do remember like a while ago asking my GSI some questions, and then she said, by the way, like if you're interested in this, I have a friend. My friend is the one who's like in charge of like working at undergrads in this other lab or this other study. So there's definitely a lot of connections that GSIs have. So I'd say definitely reach out to them. They've been an undergrad too in the past. They know what it's like to be working in this semester, and they might also be able to help connect you with the people who are actually reading the SPUR applications.
I would say that just like, yeah, I mean, I've been talking about like reading like the project very detailed. Like, I feel like you should, I don't know if you're applying to like all three, but you should have definitely applied to all three every semester if you're interested. And you should also apply to Uwrap and other things, because just like, I don't know, I feel like sometimes it's random on how you get selected based, and then there's sometimes you got lucky and then the project only have like a few applicants and you get an interview right away and you really hit it off with the interviewer and the graduate student. So it really depends, but definitely like be prepared for if you're getting an interview to know to be very like, I feel like to read the project description very closely and to really know what they're asking for and come prepared with question and be engaged during the interview process. And yeah, communicate that interest through the cover letter. But yeah, and I think if possible, like if you do get an interview and do not end up getting accepted in the end, and you really don't know where you went wrong, and you thought the interview went really well, then you could ask the interviewer, like, could you give me some feedback on how like how I was not selected. And sometimes like I have like instances where they're like, oh, we cannot like select you at this time, but like the professor, the PI was like, I'm like, I feel like you have really good potential, like do you want me to like send your like resume out to like all the professor in the department to see if they like anyone else have like an opening. So just make sure that you do your best, and I think that like if they do reject you, then they still might offer you opportunities in the future. Yeah, I think like Berkeley is also a really big university, so I think just try. It's the best advice anyone can give. I don't know.
Yeah, I would just add on to really how important it is to connect with graduate students and professors or other PIs. A lot of graduate students sometimes will have side projects or smaller projects that aren't as large as like a SPUR project that they seek for undergraduates to work on. So definitely just like coming into contact, and sometimes, you know, either they have a project themselves or they have other people in their lab who are looking for undergraduates to assist with anything. So definitely like reach out to those graduate students in the labs that you're really interested in if you really want to try to find other opportunities to develop some experience, and then using that in the next round of like SPUR applications, or if you want to pursue one of those projects. Another thing too is like maybe if it's something that's happening pretty often, you can always, you know, just find a project that really interested you, and think about like how maybe you can apply that for an independent research project and turning that into something you know, that you're really interested in and passionate about. And you can like kind of skip through the whole mentoring thing and really use the experiences that you've already developed to just kind of come up with your own independent project that sometimes can be even more valuable than a Uwrap assistantship.
Yeah, just one last thing to add. Don't worry about reaching out to professors. Someone in my lab joined because my professor was her professor for a class, and she just approached her after class and was like, "Hey, I'm interested in your research. Do you need anyone in your lab?" And my professor said, "Sure." So yeah, so besides GSIs, if you're in a smaller class or if you can have more personal interaction with the professor, feel free to reach out and see if they're willing to accept students into their lab, and you might get a position that way too.
Next question is, what are the ranging time commitments you all have experienced in working on research?
So I can start off. So I've been involved with like about, yeah, I've been involved like throughout my undergraduate experience. I've been involved with 3 projects. And the first project I have was a wet lab. So it was like 10 hours. And it was also in like USDA in like Albany. So I have to take the bus there, 30-minute there, 30-minute back. So it was really, really long. So I definitely have to plan out in my semester to have like big time chunks, or even like a Tuesday or Thursday, like completely free, or only have like morning classes so I can spend like the whole afternoon in lab. But for this project I'm doing this semester, because it's remote, I only sign up for 1 unit. So it's about like 3 hours per week, because I'm also working on my senior thesis on the side. And so you definitely can like find out a project and communicate the time commitment, but it's very varying depending on what type of project that you're in.
So for me, oh, sorry, Anna. I'm doing a remote social science work this semester. So every Friday we have a weekly meeting, and that's 2 hours long. So because I've signed up for two units, my total time commitment is about 4 to 6 hours of work per week. So aside from that weekly meeting of 2 hours, I do about 3 to 4 hours of independent work just on my own throughout the week whenever I find time. And like I mentioned before, like I try to start earlier so that if I have any questions as they come up, I can always reach out to my grad student.
Yeah, also I think in the applications, when you look on the descriptions, they will give you a general time range of how much time they're expecting you to spend per week in the lab. For most wet labs, I do think it can go from 10 to 12 hours. And like Sarah mentioned, you do have to block out large amounts of time in your schedule so you can participate in the lab and kind of see experiments through. I think this semester, because it's been online, my lab has switched to mostly doing lab meetings. And so we'll read papers over the course of the week, and then we'll have presentations during our lab meetings. So it changes depending on what kind of lab you're in, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely a wide range of different time commitments for each of the projects. The lab I'm in, it's very it's very open. I'm only doing 1 unit, so I'm doing about 3 hours a week where I go into the lab. Um, but there's like that opportunity to do more. It just depends on, you know, your schedule and how often you want to come in. But definitely some projects do require a larger time commitment. So really just like kind of think about like how much time you can set aside for a research project, and then look at your interests. And that way you can kind of go off of how much time you want to spend for the project.
Our next question is, what kind of projects should we look for if we want to do research in person? How has in-person research been during remote learning, especially for wet labs?
So my wet lab is not actually in person this semester, but I did notice when I was reapplying this semester that there was a lab that was asking for in-person students for the wet lab. So I think if you look through the descriptions, some labs are accepting in-person students. You'll just have to check through the descriptions to see which ones those are. For the most part, though, I think because of university regulations, most undergraduate researchers are not in person but I think the fall semester or the spring semester coming up might have more opportunities. So make sure to look through the project description carefully to see if the professor is specifying that they're looking for in-student or in-person researchers.
Yeah, so a lot of the SPUR projects will specifically say if they'll have an on-campus, you know, position. Other ones will say like virtual or remote. But definitely, even if you are interested in like those in-person opportunities in the future, like whereas maybe if you're not going to be on campus during the school year, during the semester, but you're really interested in looking at opportunities in the future, I would look at, you know, the specific labs or the specific projects, like what type of data are they using? Are they using it from like field collection? Like, are they using it from, you know, in-person ways to get data? So that way it gives you an idea of like what projects could look like in the future for collecting those data. I know in my lab specifically, they usually involve that field component of like going out and like collecting samples, but we're not doing that this semester because of COVID. And we're doing the lab work. So it's definitely nice to like try to see those opportunities that would incorporate that in-person component, even if it's something that you wouldn't be able to do right now.
Great. Next question is, what is the difference between Uwrap and SPUR?
I can start off. So Uwrap is the full like university like research apprentice program. So any professor can upload like a project there. So they have a lot more project than SPUR, and like the topics vary like from all different colleges. So I definitely suggest that everyone should check it out and apply to it in addition to SPUR, because yeah, they sometimes they have like, especially with GNR, sometimes there's like overlap with if we have like this, like, if it's from the same department. But other than that, like there are so many projects, and even though they're like from like different department, they have like some projects have some like might have some like similarity to the SPUR project, either that's be environmental or biology. But then at biology you have MCB and IB, which is in a lot of the projects, or in Uwrap. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Next question is, do SPUR students get paid for research? I can answer this. So students doing a faculty-initiated project don't get paid for their research. You must enroll in units, and then you get a grade of P or NP for your SPUR research unit time. If you're doing a student-initiated project, you can apply for up to $2,000 in funding to go to supplies for your research project, travel to the different research sites that you're needing, but SPUR students specifically do not get paid for research. So our next question is, for students who want to compete in certain innovation, science fair, or engineering competitions, is it possible to expand upon the faculty research and use their research as your competing project?
I can start off. I think most of the SPUR projects are the graduate student projects. So they are there. Those are the projects for their dissertation, for their PhD. So I don't think that you can use it for your competition, but from the project, from just like 1 or 2 semester, when you learn the skills, you're getting more knowledge from the lab, then you can initiate your own project. With the mentorship from the lab and the professor, the PI. And so with that, with your own project, then you can use it to compete in competition and stuff. But I don't think you can use it. I don't think you can use the graduate student level or graduate student project. But I think they are like, because like CNR and SPUR also have their annual poster exhibition, and for those, then like usually the graduate student like let you use their project as like a poster session, so you can gain experience and build skills. But for competition, I don't think so, unless anyone has other experience.
Great, thanks for responding to that, Sarah. I agree. A great way to learn about professional development and how to present research is through our Rouser College poster session and research symposium. And a lot of students who do honors programs or student-initiated projects will often start off in a lab and use their knowledge from that to develop their own project. And I could see that being used in a competition. Our next question is, how has the supervision or mentorship been through the SPUR project?
I can start. So I've really enjoyed the mentorship I've gotten through the SPUR project. I work really closely with some of the PhD students in my lab, and they'll take me through and they'll explain some of the experiments. And they're really my first point of contact. If I have questions, that's who I'm going to. And for my lab specifically, because we're a wet lab and our results do matter for publications, so I'm normally watched over for most of the experiments until I'm confident that I can do it on my own. And that's been really great. And you feel really supported in the lab, or at least in my lab. My GSI or my grad student has really been really kind and really helpful, and has taught me a lot. So it's been a great experience.
Yeah, I absolutely enjoy working with my graduate student advisor. He's very patient with me and the other undergraduate researcher, because like we have to learn a lot of new coding language throughout the project, and basically like new system and new data sets, and he is always very patient. He helped like us setting up, and he sent us resources to look over. And then yeah, he was like, you know, coding is kind of like a learning process. You can take it slow, you can take it fast. Like if you need debugging, like I can just text him and then getting on like a Zoom call with him, and he can like help me look through my code and help decoding and things like that. And then he always like, and if I have like question about my senior thesis that's not related to his research, he can answer it for me and give me ideas, and I can ask him about like post-graduation plans and things like that. So yeah, so I definitely feel like the graduate student and professor can help you in many different ways, but you have to make the connection and ask for information.
Yeah, I would add that I think one of my favorite parts about like the mentorship is the exposure in the lab meetings. A lot of the graduate students will like invite you to get to like join the lab meetings and get to know how they work, and like reviewing papers and coming up with ideas for future research is a super interesting experience to kind of see and be a part of. the graduate students really care about undergrads, and really I've had like presentations about like future careers in ecology, and like, you know, how to go about like applying for graduate schools and things like that. So they are very open to helping you out with any professional development, aside from the experience that comes from the project.
Great. How did you prepare for your SPUR interview, if that was part of the process for you?
So I can start off. So I think, yeah, definitely go through their website, and just make sure that what projects that they're having. And you can usually, like, sometimes during before, like when you're getting like an interview invitation, they usually also send out like a paper that they're working on, or like a paper they have published and they're doing like a follow-up study on. So make sure to have read those paper or read all the resources they have sent you, and kind of like draft a list of questions that you might have for the interviewer, to show that you're engaged within the research process. And you know, research is about asking questions and being inquisitive. So definitely show that during the interview process. And just ask a lot about like the methodologies, the implications, and everything like that.
Yeah, definitely research the research process, what's going on, the description and everything that's out in the public and open, for you to understand about what you're applying to. And I'd say that I also took some time practicing on my own, some questions that I thought that I might be asked. So for example, I didn't have any previous research experience going into the one I had this semester, but I did think about a class project I had where I conducted interviews, and then found some solutions and really tried to like interpret what they were saying in there. So I tried to think back about that experience, and then find a way to talk about it and present about it, when I was asked during the interview if I had any previous experience in this type of research, even though I didn't have like really formal research.
Can you talk about an experience you have had or heard of when a faculty-initiated research project has turned into an independent student research project?
I don't know it personally, but when I was in like a bio wet lab, I definitely have seen like students who were like seniors, and they were helping out with the research, and they were like doing their senior thesis in independent research in the lab after a semester of working there. So yeah, so I think that's definitely possible. And a lot of people in like more biology lab have use that route of like knowing the connection with the mentor, and having that mentor being the mentor for senior thesis for independent research.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of it does have to do with learning new techniques, learning new skills that you can apply to maybe something more specifically that you're interested in. Whether it's very related to the project you're working on, or maybe just like mildly related, it really helps to learn, like, you know, whether it's like, how do I run like statistical analyses for my data? What types of like models can I think about for what I'm interested in? How can I apply, you know, what I've learned reading these papers in this lab and in this project to, you know, to other fields of interest. So really like getting that research experience and getting that more exposure to thinking in those ways, I think is a very, very valuable experience that you can develop through the project. And that's kind of what can inspire you in the future to pursue your own. And even, you know, now you have contacts to graduate students, other people in the lab that will, you know, that may be interested in helping you out with your project and providing additional guidance and answering any questions that you have.
What have been your favorite memories / favorite days when doing research?
I don't know. I feel like my favorite moments are when um when the code like run through and like I got like a data set or like a level of product that I want, because sometimes I would spend like days on a code like not knowing where it's wrong. And then when it finally works, you're just like so happy and you're like, okay, I'm done for the week. I will like do something next week. So that's always like really, I don't know, those are my favorite moments.
Some of my favorite moments in lab, I work in a wet lab, so a lot of what I do is supervised by the grad student. So I really, really like it. I feel really happy when I get to do experiments on my own. I get to do kind of procedures on my own because it means I've gotten better. I've learned something. One of my favorite experiences was I got to inject a mouse with, I think, glucose, and that was really fun.
I would say my favorite part is when like I really start like being when I'm able to identify different species without using like a dichotomous key. After seeing them so many times in a sample, so I can just kind of look through the microscope and already know, what species that it is, and I can just write it down without having to go through an entire flow chart of what it could be. So it's just like those little things that really show that you are developing like skills and you are making progress, and then it's nice to just be able to develop that and to know that.
Yeah, a lot of my work this semester has been uncovering bits of history and trying to find like these little pieces that might have been lost in just in the way. So sometimes like I'll be reading through a lot of legal documents, which get repetitive, but then I'll find something really interesting that happened recently and then have like a whole new direction that I can take that afternoon. So I think that's really cool. And I also do like meeting with my grad student every week because then you also build a cohort with the other undergrads that I'm working with. So it's been nice to like see familiar faces every week.
Great, thank you. I think that was my favorite question that was asked today. What do you believe the most important skills are to know for research and engaging in research?
I think one of the biggest skills you can have is always being curious, always asking questions. Ask why you're doing this procedure or why are we doing this test? What is this trying to prove? What are we trying to do with this data? Get a good idea of what the project overall is doing and then what the little partial parts that you're contributing to are doing for the overall project. I think it's really good to keep asking questions, learn from your mistakes. That's also a very big one. And I think if you do that, you'll improve pretty quickly.
And adding on to Anna's point, I think it's also important to be very detail oriented and being very like attentive and somewhat of a perfectionist, because like you don't want any errors within your research, and like especially for both wet lab and social science lab, if you do anything wrong in the wet lab, like your whole experience, like just your whole experiment just go wrong. And even for social science, if you were like miss something or if you put in like the wrong data, it's also like really bad. You get like really bad like misleading results. So I think I've learned a lot to be like value, like don't be like fast or like, yeah, you don't have to be like completely fast paced and just get through it, but have to be like very detail oriented, very attentive, taking notes of whatever that you're doing. And so to make sure that you can transfer that on to your graduate student advisors. So if you're not there, they know what you have done and they can continue with the work. So yeah, that's basically what I've learned, because I used to be not very like detail oriented, but I have learned to be detail oriented through the research experience.
Yeah, adding on to what others have said, I think it's also really important to show communication skills during your interview and in your cover letter, so that your grad student or professor knows that you are someone who is open and comfortable with asking questions when needed, but also has an independent drive to try to tackle challenges on your own before like asking your professor or grad student with like every little issue that comes along the way. So definitely find a balance between those two and show that to your grad students so that you can build that relationship together.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that's been said. It's very important to just keep an open mind, ask a lot of questions. Um, you know, just as it's been said, really try to stay curious about, different tests, different models, just that way so that you can, really take the most out of the experience that you have in the project. And then, yeah, just don't be afraid to ask questions. All the grad students, are looking for those opportunities to really explain their proposals, and it really helps them as well to be able to explain that in other ways. So never be like too intimidated or afraid to ask those clarifying questions, or and because that always leads towards more research opportunities.
All right, we have time for one last question. What are some ways you recommend to connect with professors before applying to research?
I could start off by just talking about how whether it's like a class that you've taken with a professor that you were really interested in, and then maybe like getting to learn about the research that they do. Um, Courses are a really great opportunity to really know how a professor's teaching style, to really get close to them. Visiting office hours is a really great opportunity to get to know them as a person and get to know more of the research that goes on. In their lab or other places on campus. So yeah, for me personally, classes were that first like introduction to different professors that do research in areas that I'm really interested in. After that, you really get to know that a lot of the lab websites are a really great resource to like learn about graduate students and research being done in the labs. And that's a really great opportunity to go through published papers or other projects that are ongoing in different fields. And that way you can really understand, what potential projects there could be that you'd be interested in, and then maybe recognizing their name in the application or in future classes, and that way getting to connect with them further.
I think adding on to that, like all the departments have different seminars that like the professor are giving talks about their research to graduate students also give talk about their research. And so by attending seminars, you can like listen to a range of different research and kind of identify what research project you want. And there's always a Q&A session, and you can also come up to the professor and be like, oh, I'm really interested in your research with the seminar, or reach them out later. Do you have any opportunities? And especially right now, like because everything is remote, like going to seminars are so much easier. So if you have the time to do that, I would also encourage you doing that. Because usually like undergraduate student do not attend seminars, usually only graduate student do. So if you're an undergrad and you attend, it might sound like really cool. It's impressive, I guess. And usually professors don't like that you reach out during the application process, because they want to see the application process like through before like reaching out or contacting students. So I don't advise reaching out to professor during the application process, but before and after, then I think it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely talk to your professors, and not just to like look for connections or look for opportunities specifically with them, but just to have conversations. You might like gain a new perspective about like what you want to change next time you apply, or maybe they start talking about their research and you realize that it's something that you actually are not super interested in and might want to pursue something else later. So just have these conversations, just talk to people and get to know the research community on campus.
Wonderful. I want to thank our amazing panelists who joined us today and took time out of their days to share their experience. I want to thank the graduate students that supervise you all, as well as the faculty who participate in the SPUR projects. And I want to thank Anna for helping with the moderation of our panel today.